bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace, but ilkas and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible, holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was normal to have to prove a claim you make, and folks really feel ashamed expressing content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes, it's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road, the reason stay strapped with logic and facts. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road, the reason.
Hi, I'm Rob Penzak.
And I'm Larry Mendoza.
Welcome to Road to Reason, the Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. We have a great guest. You got a little snippet of the video we're going to be showing later, and that's from Anthony Magnabosco, who's a free thinker that does street epistemology out in Texas, and he's going to join us in about 15 minutes after we're done with some news and introductions. So Larry, you want to start by telling us what we have in the upcoming weeks?
Yeah, sure. So, stay tuned for upcoming weeks. We have some great shows coming up. Next week, for example, we have Daryl Ray, who will be talking to Grace Tellini and Kayla Turzak, our other hosts here at Road to Reason, about rape and religion and how patriarchal religions work against women. And we've seen this in many different religious...
A lot of the legislation that's trying to be passed over the last couple of years.
Well, we see a lot of the more extremist versions in like Islam, but we also see a lot of very bad anti-women legislation here in this country. So that'll be an interesting conversation. And also, again, stay tuned next month. We have other wonderful guests. We have David Silverman that's going to be making an appearance. He's the president of American Atheists. He'll be talking to myself and Rick Wingrove about a lot of things, about the new Reason Rally coming up, Reason Rally 2 in 2016. He'll be talking about the American Atheist decision to go to CPAC, the conservative convention. A lot of other things. We got, who else do we have? We have Peter Boghossian will be joining us at the end of next month to discuss his street epistemology, his book, his new application coming out. And I think we're going to touch a little bit about that stuff here today. And also we have former Seventh-day Adventist preacher Ryan Bell, who lived for a year to try to test out what it would be like to live as an atheist for a year. And at the end of that year, he actually became an atheist. So we'll have him on the show as well. So stay tuned for all these upcoming shows. We got a lot of great guests, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Right, and I think Ryan's is a little interesting. I think he had some skepticism from the atheist community as well. Like, are you really going to do this? And is this just a ploy? But again, once you sort of open yourself up to critical thinking, one of the natural outcomes of that is often atheism or agnosticism.
Right, exactly. And for a preacher to do that for a whole year, to live as an atheist, I think that takes a lot. And it can be difficult for him. So, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to that show. So.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get to some news for today. The first thing I want to talk about is the Daily Kos cartoonist recently had Keith Knight posted an article or cartoon kind of completely in favor of the anti-vax machine, the anti-vax movement. Although he specifically posted, "I'm not an anti-vaxxer." He's just about thinking clearly, I suppose. Right. But anyway, basically the argument he tried to lay out is that Big Pharma pays out billions of dollars a year for fraud, except in the case of vaccines, because the government protects from that. And that 3/4 of the drug ads are spent on side effects, so all medicines have lots of side effects. We acknowledge that, except for vaccines. This is his thesis. Most people who got the flu shot last year, if you ask them how they did, they got terrible results. And yet, if you ask most people, what do you think about parents that just want to protect their kids and not necessarily vaccinate, those parents are treated like pariahs and that they're anti-science. And so this was a little disturbing that you have, a cartoonist who thought this through really carefully on a liberal, progressive media outlet is completely on the anti-vax side. Whatever he says, that he's trying to distance himself immediately from what he's saying.
Well, I think what's important to remember is that on the left, on the liberal side of things, there is still a certain level of dogma and things along those lines. So it's not, oftentimes it's not so much that they're necessarily anti-vaccine, it's that they're anti-big pharma, because that's the big thing on the left, is anti-big corporation. The problem is that we know that vaccines work, and they work well, and there is no shielding. There is really no the cartoon made it sound like the government's shielding these really bad side side effects from vaccines, whereas they're letting other things in big pharma go, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't know why he would do that.
This is a public health issue, that vaccines have been one of the most constructive things we've ever offered in terms of mortality and morbidity and helping the population. And you have to separate those out. It is true, and Ben Goldacre is a physician, I think, in Australia, that has a great book about big pharma, or bad pharma it might be called. And it's true that studies can get buried, and that money certainly does play into it. And that's why we need regulations and we need transparency. It doesn't mean you throw out the science. Well, vaccines work.
The thing is, it's the same thing that I see in the anti-GMO viewpoint. They conflate bad business practices with the actual product that these businesses produce, and that's a big flaw. It's fallacious to think that way, because you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Yes, big pharma, big industry. Monsanto is the big name. Every time you hear GMO, you hear Monsanto. Yeah, they may do some very bad business practices, and that's true. But that doesn't mean that GMOs are bad necessarily and that vaccines are bad necessarily. We've seen the eradication of smallpox because of vaccines. We've seen the eradication of polio for the most part because of vaccines.
We've seen some things almost disappear that are being brought back. I like Kenneth Copeland's church in Texas, where they were spouting the anti-vax line until they had a massive outbreak of measles, and then all of a sudden, I guess maybe God changes his mind and they tell their flock, perhaps this isn't as wrong as we were suggesting.
And also recently there was I forget, she was in the news, this woman had 7 kids, and she was an anti-vaccine advocate, and all 7 of her kids ended up with like measles or mumps or something like that, and she changed her tune after that. It's sad that it takes that much to go that far, where your kids are getting diseases that shouldn't be in this day and age happening.
Right, it's not those kids' fault. They had no choice in this matter, so is that, where does parental abuse come in? You can't feed your kid chips of lead paint.
Right.
But if you aren't going to educate yourself on the matter, and your kids now get measles, and separate from those kids, all the kids that they get exposed to, there's some people that legitimately can't get vaccinated for immune reasons.
Right.
Once the herd immunity goes down because a large enough percentage of people stop vaccinating, it puts lots of other people at risk.
Right, and this is the bigger picture here. The biggest point is that this is about critical thinking. It's about, here at Road to Reason, to be skeptical about any claims that anybody makes. It's interesting, you have celebrities that go out and make a claim, and all of a sudden people will follow what these celebrities that have absolutely no training in science or anything whatsoever. They're just trying to find some kind of scapegoat because they're, like Jenny McCarthy, her kid was autistic, and so they're trying to find some scapegoat. But the problem is it destroys the critical thinking and the scientific process and how the FDA looks at these things. It just puts public opinion completely on the wrong side of the truth. And that's the problem here. And we're seeing this in a lot of different things.
It's also important to realize that most of these people that are anti-vaxxers, they're not nasty people. They're not trying to hurt their kids. And the stars that are leading this are probably think that they're doing something good. They're not out there trying to hurt people. But if you skip the critical thinking aspect, if you don't align your beliefs with reality and you just start spouting nonsense without the grounding, real people get hurt and real people die. And that's why critical thinking is so fundamental to everything. And there's a big difference between being skeptical or critical thinker and being a contrarian who doesn't know the evidence, doesn't look at the evidence, doesn't want to know the evidence, can't be influenced, and yet they're out there on public TV using their megaphone to get a lot of people to do bad, dangerous things.
And that's the problem. So that's why critical thinking is very important. I think scientific literacy is very important in this country, to be able to filter through this information that you're getting to get the best possible outcome for your family, and things like that. But
you have another news part you want to do?
There was one of the things I wanted to bring up recently. This is a completely different tangent, but Canada's Supreme Court recently ruled against prayer at city council meetings. Now, why is this interesting? Because here in this country, our Supreme Court recently ruled for council meetings. And what's interesting is that because of the Supreme Court ruling here in this country, we're starting to see a lot of different types of prayers happening now in city council meetings or county board meetings and things like that. And most recently, a Wiccan decided to give a Wiccan prayer, and the loving Christians decided to turn their backs towards her because they said that's what Jesus would do. Where are we going as far as religious tolerance in this country? We got to think about that, because what's being touted by the religious right in this country is we're all about religious freedom. We've been seeing all these religious freedom laws popping up everywhere, right? Religious freedom. But is it really religious freedom, or is it religious freedom for only one religion and one religion only? And that's, I think, an important thing, an important note to make, because as it's been evidenced by the Wiccans trying to give a prayer and having people turn their backs on them, Christians, or if it's the Satanists that are trying to now put books in schools the way Christians put Bibles in books, they're being what's the word I'm looking for? Excluded, right. They're being, so...
And then we've seen it with, you're right, that 98% of all this, or 99.8% of this, is really just about getting Christian supremacy and privilege. If, Muslims want to get something near the World Trade Center, suddenly that's not within the religious freedom context. Right. And, if atheists, if Wiccans, if whatever outside, and it becomes very transparent, because you'll see all the talk and all the propaganda about how we need this religious freedom until it's not Christian privilege, and then all of a sudden it's time to back off.
What they really want is not religious freedom, is they want Christian privilege in government. That's really what it boils down to. It's not religious freedom. I'll repeat that. It is Christian privilege. Because if it was truly about religious freedom, then they would not have a problem with Wiccans or atheists or anybody else that to give a prayer, a convocation, or whatever it is during these board meetings.
And also, we're not trying to go into the church and say, here's what you're allowed to talk about in church. Right. All we're saying is separation of church and state is real, and you need, if you take out revisionist Christian historians, everybody agrees that that's real, and it's clear that our founders were deists. They weren't Christians. They went incredibly out of their way. It couldn't be more plain in the written words that we're not a Christian nation.
And this is the reason why, because, and Canada has it right, the reason why there is separation of church and state is to avoid discrimination between religions, but also between religions and non-religions, and the religious and the non-religious. What a lot of Christians forget is that the separation of church and state was very useful in stopping one form of Christianity to becoming overpowering over the rest of them.
Right, it wasn't just atheists that were clamoring for protection. The Catholics don't want the Protestant Bible
and vice versa.
In their school to their kids.
Vice versa. You remember, I'm a little, I wasn't born during the Kennedy days, but I remember there was reading about there's a big brouhaha when Kennedy became president because he was a Catholic. Right. Oh, big deal, big deal. Why is that a big deal? We're all about religious freedom in this country. It shouldn't matter.
Right, he went out of his way to say he's not taking his orders from the Vatican. Yes, I'm Catholic, but I'm not. And now you get any riffraff that's willing to say, I don't know science, I don't care about science, like Scalia, for instance. They can rise to the top of society as long as they're saying, yeah, I'm willing to take my orders from God. Now, which God are they taking it from? Right. How are they sure it's really God? Again, the critical thinking skills need to be...
Again, this is, critical thinking skills. But, okay, well, let's move on. We got to go on break here soon. But
one more news thing, if I can. We'll do this quickly. One of the things you mentioned was how celebrities like Jenny McCarthy, who may not know anything about a subject, are suddenly media spokespersons on things that they're completely ignorant about. Dr. Oz is actually a cardiothoracic surgeon, a legitimate physician, but he promotes a whole bunch of contrarian views that are not, scientifically based, like homeopathic medicine, and there's a whole series of these things. And he's got an enormous megaphone, so millions of people hear him, and he's a physician. So there were a group of other physicians that wrote to Columbia to say, we really, the hospital university that he works at, to say, you need to distance yourself from this guy because he's a quack, and you can't give the authority of a legitimate medical institution behind this. And their response basically from the university was that we protect the freedom of speech of all of our employees. But there's a difference. We're not trying to stop Dr. Oz. Well, ideally, it'd be nice if he didn't have a megaphone to repeat this dangerous stuff. But the call was not for him to be silenced. It was for the university to separate themselves and say, this is not medically based or scientifically based. Columbia's name is not behind this. But money is always a big issue, and they didn't take that separation.
And that's very important to note, is that these people do have freedom, academic freedom, freedom of speech, and they can do that. It would be discriminatory, I think, for Columbia to fire Dr. Oz for making these quack kind of science things for money. But at the same time, I think Columbia has a responsibility to distance themselves a little bit, say, hey, this is not our, because like Columbia is an Ivy League school, and here you have Dr. Oz spouting this nonsense. Yeah, they have a responsibility to at least say this is not the views represented by Columbia University.
Right, so it's the same kind of thing. If the NIH on their website has something about alternative medicines, where's the public to turn to get some good information? And one place they can turn. So for the atheist or skeptical thinker of the week, I want to put forward Jerry Coyne, a very world-famous evolutionary biologist. He noted, when we're talking about the issues with the anti-vax, that the liberal media is a big problem also. We're all well aware that Fox News and the Drudge Report, and there's a bunch of very right-leaning stuff that is not interested in the science. This was on the Daily Kos that we saw this anti-vax cartoonist. And so Larry, what do you think about just the liberal media and progressive media, just mainstream media, educating themselves scientifically so they can educate the public instead of entertain?
I've always been a big critic of both the left and the right when it comes to scientific literacy, and the media is certainly a big part of that. I think the media, even the liberal media, has done a poor job at really putting forward like these, dispelling anti-vax claims, anti-GMO claims. As a matter of fact, a lot of the left liberal media promotes this kind of uncritical thinking. So we see it both on the left and the right, certainly. The media they need to do a better job. They need to get better scientifically literate and start to dispel a lot of this quackiness. It has to happen.
Right, and news should be about educating, not entertaining or just repeating. If you do want to learn more about faith versus fact or science versus quackery, Jerry Coyne has a book coming out, Faith versus Fact, coming out in a few weeks. You can go over to Why Evolution is True, his blog. You can look on Amazon and Goodreads. There's some nice reviews there. I'm very excited to read that book. And again, he's really a staunch defender that whenever some quackery is floated, he'll be out there in the lead trying to explain what's going on, as opposed to testing the wind, seeing which way people want to go.
Yeah, and so he has two books out, Why Evolution is True, which is also the name of his blog, so whyevolutionIstrue.com, and also the new book with his Fact versus Fiction, which is going to be, or Fact versus Fiction, Why Science and Religion Are Incompatible. That's you can see the image there. So. All right, let's move on to one more thing we got before the break.
Right, we're supposed to do jokes of the week. And let's see, I think there were a couple that I was going to just describe. One is talking about miracles, and it shows basically a timeline on the x-axis, and it shows the frequency bobbing up and down as miracles are reported until cameras are invented, and then it plummets to zero. And a few years later, Photoshop is invented, and it comes all the way back up. And so, miracles, again, there's no grounding for them scientifically. They're not possible scientifically, otherwise, they wouldn't be miracles. But let's go. We had an even more important real joke of the week. So what's your joke?
So I like to introduce a segment called the Morons with Oxymorons. And this week's joke is Mike Huckabee went and recently stated that if he's elected president, it would be God's blessing to fight the so-called secular theocracy that has been established and imposed by atheists. Think about that. A secular theocracy.
That's it for Morons with Oxymorons.
That's your joke of the week, Morons with Oxymorons.
All right, we're going to cut away to a quick public service announcement, and then we'll be right back with Anthony Magnabosco.
In past installments, The Infidel has reported on pushback to advertising campaigns by Pamela Geller and her organization, the American Freedom Defense Initiative, which stretches the limit of the First Amendment. In February, we reported on some unknown person or group who had been applying large cutouts of Marvel's Islamic superhero Kamala Khan to cover Geller's ads. Last October, we told you about a different placard campaign in which Geller wanted to display images of the beheaded journalist James Foley, despite criticism of the campaign by Foley's parents. However, despite resistance by port authorities in cities from Philadelphia, Boston, D.C., and San Francisco, Chicago, and Miami, the courts are siding with Geller and insisting that the city buses display the offensive anti-Islamic pseudo-hate speech. In response, Ibrahim Hooper of the Council on American Islamic Relations said, "People of goodwill just need to get together and marginalize her type of anti-Muslim hatred." Geller cheered the court's decision in a statement saying, "Jew haters have been running anti-Semitic and anti-Israel ads on buses for years. We are responding." She offered no specific examples in defense of her assertion.
Homemade noodles. Marty, stop it! Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It reminds me, I've been thinking maybe we should try a new form of birth control. I heard about this one, it's called the IUD, intrauterine device. Or we could try the patch on your arm. Actually, I think that one goes on your butt.
Bedsider.org has birth control information and a lot more. And it's...
What do you think, though? Arm or the butt?
There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week, the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Hi, may I please have an application? Thank you.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma.
Okay.
Take that first step towards a better future. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. We have a very interesting guest on, Anthony Magnabosco. I think I pronounced that correct. And we're going to be talking about street epistemology.
Anthony, are you with us?
Are you with us?
I am here, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I just wanted to start out, before we get into the nitty-gritty of street epistemology and the things you've been doing with that, a little bit of your background, where, were you always a skeptic? Did you, what's your road? Were you a Christian before then? And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background?
Oh, sure. Well, I was raised in a Christian family, Catholic to be specific. I think I may have always just been a skeptic. I remember when I was in second grade telling my parents that I thought God was like Santa Claus. So that didn't go over very well. So they quickly arranged a meeting with a nun and a priest, and we sat down for, it seemed like an hour, but it may have been only 10 minutes, who knows. And they spent a lot of time convincing me that God was real. And boy, at the end of the conversation, they said, "Okay, Anthony, do you believe now?" And I said, "Yes, I believe now." But I never really did. I think I was always a skeptic. I just went through the motions. And it really wasn't until I got married and started having kids and my children started asking those big questions in life. What happens when you die and all that other stuff. That's when I really started realizing that, my gosh, I'm an atheist and I don't believe any of this stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's when it finally hits you, it's a kind of a like this really big wake-up call. Like, whoa, I'm an atheist. Now what do I do?
Where is your family on this? Did anybody else take the skeptical journey, and how's your relationship with them in that?
As far as I'm aware, my immediate family is really the only skeptic or atheist in the family. That's willing to admit it, I suppose. I come from a family of very devout believers. Some are even young earth creationists. So we really differ greatly on that particular issue, but we respect each other and we sort of dance around it. Occasionally it comes up. It's actually one of the reasons why I like to have my videos. I'm hopeful one day that maybe my family members will actually watch it, and it might help broach the subject that I've always wanted to talk with them about.
Yeah, I was curious if your skills, and we'll talk more street epistemology in a few minutes, but I was curious if those skills sort of translate in letting you engage your family in those conversations, or if there's some things that stand in the way of it.
Oh, sure. I mean, the great thing about street epistemology is that it's not only for God beliefs. You can use it to discuss, you're talking about the anti-vaxxers, for example, or conspiracy theorists, or people that believe in luck. You can use the techniques for a wide variety of discussions, including politics. So even this past Thanksgiving, of course, politics comes up, and I can't help myself but slipping into that street epistemology mode where you start asking the Socratic questions.
So let me ask you this question. Can you describe to our viewers what street epistemology is? Or maybe start with epistemology, first of all, what that is. Getting into street epistemology in a Socratic method, and kind of describe this process, because this is something now you've been doing that's based off of, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but based off of Peter Boghossian's book that you've been reading and that you've read, and you've now applying it, and we can talk about the successes or what your feels are. But just describe to us a little bit about what street epistemology is.
Sure. Well, street epistemology is the study of knowledge, or how one comes to know what's true. And the street part of it is basically just the idea of getting out on the street and talking to strangers about how they've come to their belief. Now, you don't have to actually go out on the street and tow the camera around like I do. You can have these conversations, with a family member or a coworker during lunch or on the bus. But the street epistemology, in a nutshell, is basically using Socratic questioning with people that believe in anything. Like I said, it could be really about any belief, to really help examine the method that a person used to get to that belief in the first place. That's really all it is.
So it's helping. It's not just you telling them stuff, right? It's really you're helping them realize where their beliefs come from, what the strengths and weaknesses of their foundation are.
Exactly, Rob. Rob, that's such a key part of it. I'm not standing out there, or the people that actually conduct street epistemology, we're not out there telling people what to think. It's a big difference between what somebody might be as an evangelizer or a proselytizer. They'll tell a person what to think. As a street epistemologist, you're just asking questions to understand how a person arrived at their belief in the first place. So there's a very big difference between the two.
So what exactly is the Socratic method to street epistemology? What does that mean?
Well, of course, it's based off of Plato's Socrates, and it's just a matter of asking probing, non-judgmental, sincere questions of your interlocutor, of your conversation partner. Again, it's not telling anybody what to think, but just asking questions. And what usually happens is when you listen very closely to the person that you're speaking with, and you reformulate what they're saying to you back as a question, it allows them to hear what they're saying to you in their, basically it's their own words coming back to them, but in your voice. You're essentially acting as a mirror to them. And oftentimes, people never really think about how they've come to a belief in the first place. And it's so incredibly powerful to be able to, if you're the one holding a belief, for you to hear your own belief methodology coming back to you, it's extremely powerful, because oftentimes a lot of people don't really have a very good reason for holding the belief in the first place.
You know, and one of the things I've noted in lots of your videos is you really capture the non-adversarial approach. Very often, the people walk away. It's like people are really happy to engage in these conversations. It's not that an atheist is ambushing them and showing them how foolish they are. You know, maybe talk about that whole, this is not a counter-apologetics approach, it's not a debate. You know, talk about that positiveness of this approach.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the reasons why I wanted to show this video in particular was because I've been going to this location for 4 or 5 days and having wonderful conversations with people and just saying, hey, would you like to talk about how you got to your God belief? And most people really like talking about that.
Sure, yeah.
And I'll agree to have a 5-minute, 10-minute conversation. When it's all said and done, almost always, 99% of the time, the person is happy that they've had the conversation. We shake hands, we're smiling, we're laughing. And the other people around you often see that. And in this case with Miguel coming up, he actually approaches me. He's been observing me on his campus for the last couple of days, having these very engaging conversations. He gets very curious and inquisitive and then comes up to start the conversation with me, which was really a joy.
Well, you know, why don't we jump into the video? So Anthony's prepared a couple of videos for us, and we're going to have you go through one, give commentary, then we'll take a break halfway through, and we'll talk about it, then do the second half. And then I do want to get to some of the other things you do outside of epistemology, but we'll keep an eye on the clock, because I know we're just going to have too many things to say, but if we can run that part 1 of the video, and you walk us through it.
Absolutely.
Hey. I got a question. What are you doing? I'm interviewing people. Oh. My first name is Anthony. Miguel. Miguel?
Yes,
oh,
sir.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm just interviewing strangers about how they arrived at their God belief. And just cool. Do you want to do a quick interview?
Yeah,
All right,
sure.
Awesome. I'll time it for 5.
Okay.
Miguel.
Well,
what God do you believe in, dude?
I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior.
Why?
Because I know He died on the cross, and I know He's the Almighty God.
Okay.
Now, one of the first things you'll notice is that I have a timer going on the left-hand side here. So I've got about 60 seconds to communicate. And then there will be little breaks here and there as we go through. But as you can tell, Miguel walks up to me. He's been seeing me on his campus and wondering what's going on. And I'm wearing a GoPro, and I have a little timer and a whiteboard, and he was just really interested in it. So he immediately agreed to speak with me. And one thing I want to point out, too, is notice the very friendly approach. I'm not yelling at him. I'm not telling him what to think. We're not debating. This is just going to really be a very friendly back and forth conversation about why he believes what he believes.
Okay, you can roll the second part of that clip.
It'll probably be starting any second now. First thing I'm going to do here is establish a belief scale.
Sure.
All right, you know what I'm thinking? So guys, let the video clip keep rolling the whole time. He left some breaks in there. So about this. So I think, like you said, building rapport seems like one of those really critical elements that keeps people from getting defensive. Is that why you approach it that way?
It's such an important part, and oftentimes I'll forget that key part of it. But yeah, ask, how's your day? What kind of classes are you taking here? I try to avoid jumping right into it, but sometimes I just can't help myself and we start talking right away.
Which is different than some of these street preachers that damn you to hell the minute they see you.
Exactly.
Although you said that you have a special affinity for street preachers, right? You sort of
How confident are you that the belief is true? If 100% was, I'm 100% confident that Jesus died on the cross for me, and 0% is I'm not confident at all that Jesus died for me, where would you be on the scale?
On the 100%.
Wow.
Yeah. Although sometimes I may feel like I struggle with my faith sometimes, how sometimes you go through things and we feel like God's not here, and in reality, we stray away from Him. He never leaves us, and so I always know,
you just know it.
Yeah.
How do you know it, dude? How could you be 100% confident on a belief?
I don't know. I guess faith, and just the foundation I was raised upon.
Okay, so we got about 30 seconds here, and I got a timer I'm running too. So Miguel says that, and very quickly on, we kind of cruise right through the rapport building phase, but faith is really the main reason for his belief. And he also mentions here that, it's very quick, but he was raised up on it. It's the foundation of why he believes what he believes. And you'll also notice coming up here that bystanders are actually quite common. His friend's going to walk up here, and it's really important to try to minimize distractions.
Sure.
What is your definition of faith? If I were to write it down on this clipboard right now, what would you?
Faith is
how would you describe it?
Things unseen.
The hope in things unseen. And that's faith.
I would say so. Would you give a different term?
I've heard similar definitions of it.
You know, like I got saved when I was 5. Like when I got saved.
At 5 years old?
Yeah, like my grandma talked to me. Like she introduced me to Jesus, and like at that time, like when I was 5 years old, I knew I was gonna go to heaven.
Okay. What I thought was really interesting here was how he asked me to define faith for him.
Right.
He came up with his own definition, but he asked for clarification. It's really funny that happened, and it's not uncommon, but so many professional apologists will really give Boghossian a hard time for his redefinition of faith. But in this case, this particular person wanted me to clarify the definition for him, and I avoided that temptation.
Can we get back to the faith part of it?
Yeah.
I know that you're using faith to be so confident that Jesus works in your life and died for you, and you believe in it so strongly. And you define it as the hope in things unseen. Do you have hope? Do you use faith for other things? And do you hope for things that are unseen in your life?
Yeah.
Besides Jesus?
Yeah, I think
you do.
People put their faith in all types of stuff. But I guess like for example, I have a test on Wednesday, and I hope I pass on Wednesday.
You hope you pass.
You know what I mean?
Are you equating faith with hope? Faith, hope. Is faith the same as hope?
I wouldn't say faith is the same as hope, but faith, you kind of put your hope in faith.
With regards to this example for use for this test, you hope that you pass it.
But I know in order for me to pass it, I have to study.
Sure.
To understand the material.
Okay.
Before I take the test.
Yeah.
You know?
When you hope that you pass the test, is there not an element of a possibility that you might fail the test?
Yes.
Is hope the same way? Does faith have an element of it possibly not happening or not being true?
I guess that's just something that you just don't know until you die.
If faith is hope, and it has that element of it not being true, can somebody really be at the 100% mark on the confidence of a belief being true?
I would say so. Because it's like you put your all into that. Like, you know, like I put my all into Jesus.
You're invested into it?
Yeah. And it's a daily, you know what I mean? Like I feel like the Bible says work out daily. You know what I mean? And I feel like sometimes, like some days, we don't really, I don't know if you're a believer or...
I'll answer it later.
I don't know how you believe or anything like that. But I mean, like, you know, like I just feel like daily, you know, I mean, like you work out your faith on a daily basis, you know, because God's grace is renewed every day in our lives.
Are you saying that because you've invested so much into the belief that it's difficult to consider that the belief might not be true?
I guess. That was fast.
It was a fast 5, wasn't it? Do you want to go another couple minutes?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, now I think this is our hard break, is it not?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I could just say, it's kind of hard to really get the whole grasp of this, maybe with all the interruptions, but we're having a discussion about how faith and hope are the same and how are they different.
Right.
And at no point am I telling Miguel what the right answer is. I'm just asking him, what are the differences? And he gives this wonderful example about how faith is hope, and hope is as if he hopes that he passes the test on
really
Wednesday.
Fascinating that this investment in the belief and your acknowledgement that because I've invested so much time and effort into the belief that I'm reluctant to even examine if the belief might not be true. Is that what you're saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me.
That is what I'm saying.
It is?
Yeah, like, you know, like to me, like, in a way, I think, how can God not be real? You know what I mean? Like, out of everything that's in the world and everything that you see, like the sky and like just like everything, like how could it be something other than God? You know?
Just not knowing something makes you think it's all the more possible that this specific God exists in the life?
I would say so.
You know, I've had conversations with people of other religions on this campus and elsewhere.
For sure.
I've talked to a Muslim woman who said that she's 100% convinced that Allah is the one true God, and I think we probably agree she has the right to believe in that God. She uses faith and she hopes that Allah is real. She hopes it, and she's invested a lot of time in the belief. Right? Like, she was raised in it, she puts a lot of time in it, she goes to the mosque and does all these prayers. She's invested a lot of time in it. She hopes that it's real. She really wants it to be real because she's invested so much time in it. In what way does that make her belief any more true than yours?
I don't know too much about the Muslim religion, so I don't know how.
You don't even have to know about it. Like, I don't know much about it either, but she's convinced about it.
Yeah.
You know, she's certain. She's 100% convinced that the belief is true and that Muhammad went to heaven on a winged horse. Like, she really believes it. Mm-hmm. She uses faith. She hopes that it's true. She's invested a tremendous amount of time in the belief. How could she be so confident in the belief that's a completely different belief than you?
I don't know. I see what you're saying. Maybe just her upbringing?
Okay, so I guess we're going to just cruise through this, but the timer has expired with Miguel at the 5-minute mark, and he immediately was happy to keep going on. Mm-hmm. That's a good sign that they're enjoying the conversation. It was also interesting how early he mentioned, he said, I don't know if you're a believer or not. I used to be I'm very proud of being an atheist, and I wouldn't usually hesitate to answer that question, but I found that it usually derails the conversation, and you don't want to do that.
Right.
Do you think her upbringing has any bearing on the truth of the belief?
No, because I know that Allah is not real. I know there's only one true God.
So her being raised in the culture has no bearing on the belief being true, her belief in Allah. Yet you're standing here today possibly largely because you were raised in it and exposed to this specific God?
But I think if I wasn't raised, like just like stuff that I've been through in my life, you know what I mean? Like
you think if you were raised to be a Hindu, you might be a Christian today?
Yeah.
You do?
I do. Just because of like I've seen God, like just like in ways that I wouldn't even think, like I just know like this has to be Jesus. You know what I mean?
You're seeing things that are happening in your life and you're attributing them to the Christian God.
Yeah.
But this woman would see things in her life and attribute them to a completely different God. How could we go about figuring out who would be more correct in the belief? Is there any way that we can tell that you might be more correct than her? Or vice versa?
Yeah.
If you have no way of knowing if you are more correct in the belief than that Muslim woman, how could you possibly be at the 100% mark on the confidence of your belief? Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it, Miguel.
I absolutely love this conversation because Miguel is... If you can find a person who's honestly willing to answer questions and reflect about how they got to their belief, that's such a huge part of street epistemology. And I love this conversation. I can't watch it enough. I think I've seen this 50 times.
I want to talk about one thing that you do or you actually don't do in there is when he says that his investment in something helps make it true, or that's the implication of his stuff. You don't sort of pounce and try to tear him apart. And I guess it really goes to the heart of street epistemology. You're trying to ask him stuff so he realizes that there's a problem in that. How do you sort of get to that level? Because a lot of people are in that debate mindset where you catch somebody in a slip-up and you nail them.
So difficult. It's so difficult. And there were many opportunities there for me to jump at him. He opened a door for me to start talking about the Muslim religion, right? And I said, well, I don't know that much about it, but she believes it. And then another time he said something like, what was it? Well, yeah, his investment. I mean, it would have been easy for me to say, what a tremendous waste of your time. Why are you doing this with something that you have no idea is, you have to resist those temptations. That is debating, and that is not street epistemology. Me approaching, if I did anything like that, there's no way that we would have gotten to the end point of this conversation. He would have shut down. He would have maybe started entering debate mode. He may have walked away angry.
Right.
That would have completely defeated the purpose, and that's the key part of street epistemology, is that it's a friendly, open, honest, introspective conversation that is not debate. It is not telling somebody what to think, and at the end of it, you both end up walking away, frankly, amazed at the conversation. And I spent hours thinking about this talk, and I hope Miguel has as well.
No, it was definitely. I mean, when I first saw this video, I was quite impressed with the way the conversation. I mean, the way it went at every single point. I was like, oh, here we go. He's gonna get into a nope. But here it keeps going. Very friendly, very smooth. I mean, even when he didn't know how to answer to himself, you can see the gears turning. Like he started thinking. And I think I think right there, I mean, if I would consider that a successful street epistemology session, I would think that would be. Am I correct?
Oh, if somebody says, I don't know, or I've never really thought about that, or I'm going to have to really think about that, that's huge. If you can get a person to say, I'm not really sure how I came to this belief, I need some time to think about it, that's a win. That's a win right there. What's funny, though, Larry, is that some people will see me missing opportunities to jump on the typical counter-apologetic and give me crap about it because I missed a key opportunity to explain why that's Pascal's wager or something like that.
Right.
And it's very tempting to want to jump on that, but that just encrusts the person further into their belief.
Okay, can you talk about how you use pauses and allowing things to remain silent for an uncomfortable 2 or 3 seconds or 10 seconds? How does that work?
That is one of the most important. I keep saying that this is the most important thing, but this video with Miguel was so perfect because it covers a lot of the things that you should be doing when you talk to somebody. Again, whether it's on the street or a family member at dinner or whatever. The pauses are critical because it gives a chance for the interlocutor, your conversation partner, to think about the words that they just said. Okay, so if he makes a profound statement that faith is hope, just like I hope that I pass the test on Wednesday.
Right.
Me taking a few seconds to let that sink in, not just for myself, but also for him. It's a very powerful technique, and it's one of the things that I struggle with the most. It's a common desire to want to fill an empty space with just talk. And sometimes that could be the worst thing that you can do during these exchanges.
Because you want to give people time to think, and that's the idea, is to get them to think about why they've reached the conclusions they've reached, which is, the whole basis behind epistemology in general is how do you get to know what you know. So that's very interesting. How many of these interviews have you done, and how long have you been doing it?
Wow. Well, I've been doing them since December of 2013, but my style was so rough, I'd really hate to even call it street epistemology back then. But I think I've probably spoken to 500 people. And maybe uploaded 100 of those videos.
Wow.
Can you walk us back to, again, where you started? I think you mentioned that it was something you saw Daniel Moscato do, and that you liked how she interacted, and then walk that through reading Peter Boghossian's book and how you guys became involved in this process.
Yeah. So after I kind of went through the angry atheist phase, or at least I thought that I was done with it, I started watching videos of interactions between believers, religious believers, and atheists. And Daniel Moscato has this great video. I must have watched it, 10 times, where she's engaging with these professors about the Bible. And she's extremely knowledgeable about Old Testament, New Testament, and I was just enchanted with it. And I thought, okay, this is how I'm going to direct my energy, because I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't know if it was going to be a podcast or what. So we have a lot of street preachers in San Antonio, and I thought, well, I know enough about the Bible and counter-apologetics, and I'm just starting to read this book by Peter Boghossian, so I'm going to go out and start conducting street epistemology. And of course, the very first, 5 days of my doing this, it's completely the opposite of what I should have been doing. I was yelling at people. I was arguing. People were leaving the line, standing to go into these tourist traps to tell me to back off of the people I was harassing. I mean, it was the complete opposite of what you've just seen. But it's one of the reasons why I like to record these things and leave the videos out there so that myself and other people can see the progression. I really hope one day that I might look back at this video with Miguel and just cringe and think, oh my gosh, that was so horrible. I really want to get better at this, and there's so many tools available to get better at it. And but again, I leave the videos out there. People can see the improvement, and I can watch them again and again and improve myself.
Yeah, that's yeah. So I guess practice makes perfect. It's like everything else. You just got to keep doing it. And I understand there's some Facebook groups now dedicated to street epistemology. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. I really wish that I had known about the street epistemology Facebook group before I really started taking Danielle's work and reading the book and taking it to the streets. There's a private street epistemology Facebook group that is fantastic. There are so many people that are dedicated to Boghossian's techniques and go out on the street or conduct these online over Twitter, social media, email, all over the world. And we share our encounters with each other, and we end up learning from it. In fact, we just started some role play activities where 10 people can get online on a Google Hangout. One person plays a theist or a believer, and the other one plays the street epistemologist, and we observe it. We do a breakdown of it immediately afterwards, and we end up becoming better because of it.
Can you tell us if there are any other resources you'd recommend and where people can get a hold of your actual breakdowns, which I find incredibly valuable, where you walk through, like you've done with us, and you go through where did I mess up, what could I have done better? So how can people track those down if they want to learn these techniques?
Well, ultimately, probably the best place to go will be the streetepistemology.com website. That will be an aggregator site where you can find a link to pretty much anything related to street epistemology. In the short term, you can just check out my YouTube channel. I have a series of tutorials that take you from a conversation with a diehard Christian to an atheist who believes in karma to a Muslim who believes in Islam. We even get into a very right-wing conversation with a Tea Partier who thinks that Obama is a dictator. So it covers everything. But if you want to, learn more about it, just go to the YouTube channel. It's my name with 210 after it, which is the area code of San Antonio.
Okay. Yeah, we'll post that on. If we don't get up here, we'll put that on our Facebook page.
Yeah, Magnabosco 210 on YouTube.com.
But really, the Facebook page is great. There are so many people that are way better at this than I am, and I end up learning from them, and they learn from me, and we all become better because of it.
We have about 6 minutes left. We want to hit one or two more things on street epistemology, and then go to some of the other work you do. You've been working with Peter Boghossian, with a bunch of us, Larry and I are involved too, on Atheos and Adventure and Truth and Reason. That app is in beta testing right now. It's due out hopefully by the end of May. Tell us about that experience. What's that app about?
Oh wow, the app is the tool that you probably always the app is the tool that I always wanted after reading Boghossian's book.
Right.
The part that I liked about Boghossian's A Manual for Creating Atheists book the most was the conversations where it was a back and forth between Dr. Boghossian and somebody they ran into at the gym. I love that. I couldn't get enough of it. And the app is primarily, that's what it's almost all about. There are things we talk about, deepities and logical fallacies, but a large chunk of it is recreating conversations between believers and street epistemologists and putting you directly in that environment where, using your phone or an Android device or an iPad, you can immediately be immersed in a conversation with a Scientologist or somebody that's a Mormon or a very diehard evangelical Christian. It's a wonderful tool to really get your feet wet before you actually decide to go out and have conversations like this on your own.
Yeah, and I think the app is going to be a very, as you said, a great tool for people that want to learn more about street epistemology. They can do it on their phone. They can do it, as you said, on the iPad or whatever. And it's in a format of kind of a game that you go through. So it'll be fun when it comes out, I think. And
it's very non-threatening. It lets you sort of work up that learning curve without making all the mistakes and get past it, so you can really start helping people quickly.
Right.
That's a real key part. There was a real effort to make this less academic and really more of a fun learning experience with a little bit of an entertainment angle to it.
Sure.
So it's going to be a fantastic app, and I'm honored to be a part of it. And the content, the gameplay is amazing.
Right, and there are a ton of people in the secular community that are contributing, articles and all sorts of stuff. So we're going to have Peter Boghossian on here May 31st to go through a bunch more of that app, that's being released. So let's spend the last few minutes, if you don't mind. Can you tell us what other stuff do you do outside of street epistemology? You mentioned that you're a member of Freedom, FFRF.
Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Right, and you said that there was an incident with the San Antonio Police Department that you got involved with.
Oh, yes. Well, I haven't technically got involved, but I did notice that, I've been a member of FFR this is probably my 4th year. It's a great organization that really fights to keep religion out of government, the way our founding fathers intended. I mean, we don't ask for much; we're just asking for neutrality. But it's a great group, and sure, I noticed that the San Antonio Police Department on their Facebook page posted a picture for the second time in the last 6 months about how the officers will pray for their roll call. And that just struck me as a little odd, and it almost seemed as if they were gloating about it. And then judging by the comments, of course, that follow, it's very clear that people are perceiving this as favoritism towards a Christian God. Now, whether or not they intended it that way or not, I don't know. But when I see stuff like that, I just can't sit by anymore. So I just made a call and had a very friendly conversation with an officer that was part of the social media group, and just to say that, remind them that the secular movement is growing. The number of people under the age of 25 that don't ascribe to a particular religion is increasing.
Yep.
And just to be a little bit more sensitive to that.
Right. And that's the idea, I think that's what the focus, or at least I think, in my opinion, the focus of the secular movement should be, is normalization of atheists and to kind of stop this, Christian influence in our government. Because how would one feel if you have an atheist sticker in the bumper, in the back of your car, and you get pulled over by a Christian cop? Right off the bat, you're going to feel, especially when you see things like this, these cops praying, and you're going to feel like already they're against you. And
well, not only that though, too, but I have to wonder if there are any other non-believing police officers in the department that feel uncomfortable about walking out or having to sit in the meeting and not be ostracized. So I just wanted them to be a little bit more sensitive to that as well for that reason.
Along those lines of normalization, you mentioned that you do some work with the homeless, an atheist group. So tell us about that.
Oh, I'm really proud to be a part of Atheists and Humanists Helping the Homeless. I wasn't the founder of the group, but there's a woman that put it together, and we go out every month, and we have donations come from atheists in the San Antonio area, and some businesses. They contribute some money. We buy supplies, sunscreen, wipes, all sorts of things that a homeless person would need that they can't readily get from a local charity organization that helps them.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, we go out there and we give blankets out, and it was just great.
We got to give you about 30 seconds. Last thing is we have Daryl Ray on next week. You said that with Recovering from Religion, they have a hotline. What's your involvement in that, and how is that different from what you do with street epistemology?
Well, yes, I signed up to be a volunteer. I'm still going through the training program. I haven't taken any calls yet. The key thing there is to listen and don't be judgmental, and direct people to the resources that it sounds like they need.
Good.
I'm not out there to convince them or ask them Socratic questions. I have to try to divorce myself from that.
Got to cut you off right there. We're almost out of time, but I want to thank you for coming on the show, and we'll hopefully you can come back. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, guys. That was fun.
Thanks.